It's becoming very challenging and increasingly complex and time consuming to answer the critical questions. Are my public cloud applications and services configured securely? Even simple misconfiguration issues represent significant risk, as evidenced by several public data disclosures during the last year. For your enterprise strategy, if you have a multi-cloud strategy, cloud security is the right and most significant part in the security management for your data, either it's public or on-premise. Let's go for an intro.
Welcome to the OTech Talks podcast, where it's all about working on technologies. You will hear the latest tech information, and your host, Kashif Manzoor, brings together product overviews, how-tos, best practices, tips and tricks, and troubleshooting techniques.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening based on your time zone. Welcome to the OTech Talks podcast. This is your host, Kashif Manzoor, is with you with the session number 92. And today we'll be going to have a guest speaker. And before I will introduce the guest speaker, if you're new to the show, most welcome. If Open Tech Talks is your weekly sandbox for technology insights, experimentation, and inspiration with the primary objective of learning and sharing. That's the whole objective behind it. Over the last few weeks, we have covered the workload migration to cloud, how you want to get started with that, and there were a number of other sessions on how to start infrastructure or how to start working on cloud providing, any cloud provider. Now today we have a guest speaker with us, John Grange, and he's a CTO of Ops Compass, and we interacted with through the social channel, and then I thought to bring him on the show, and he kindly accepted it, and we are going to discuss some personal thoughts, how he has started his career journey, some of the learnings, and what is important if you are going as a cloud strategy and multi-cloud, and what are the important factors, important things keep in mind. And please keep in mind, it's a knowledge sharing session. It's not about the product marketing or anything. Our focus was primarily from learning point of view. What are the key areas of the security challenges which we are facing nowadays? And that was the whole objective. And then it's just a disclaimer for everyone, the same standard disclaimer from Open Tech Talks point of view. And that all the sessions are being recorded here based on the learning and sharing, and it's nothing to do with previous or current employers. And I will just, before I will invite our John on the show, I would just want to share with you, I was searching why it comes in my mind, the security on one, when I was going through the hype cycle of cloud security for 2020 from Gartner, and what I observed, there were, innovation trigger, peak of inflated expectations, and through of disillusionment and slope of enlightenment and all that, it goes right, the curve. And in that one, the most important factor was on the cloud security posture management, cloud access security, and how you need to manage it. It's very, very becoming increasingly important for everyone and all the organizations. And one of the key component was out of it, cloud security posture management, according to the Gartner hype cycle, and it's on the curve. So that's what we are gonna cover today, that why it's important and what you need to have from different vendors. Definitely each cloud vendor has their own solutions on the multi-cloud strategy point of view, or on the posture management or the cloud security management solutions. Each and every vendor, it's Google, Oracle, Microsoft Azure, or AWS. So this session is not focused on any vendor point of view. It's just a generic session which will invite our guest to share with us his journey, how he has started working as a startup, what he's doing, what are the books he like, and that's where we stand today. Let's invite John on the show. Today we have our new guest with us, John, and he's the co-founder and CTO of Ops Compass, and we will just welcome him on board, and we'll ask a couple of questions. We'll learn from him, and that's the whole objective, learning and sharing with each other, because I'm the strongest believer on the social learning. That's important. So John, if you introduce to our audience, so please, so what you do, how you started, what motivates you, so just give us some context.
Sure. So I'm John Grange. I'm co-founder and CTO at Ops Compass. I'll get in a little bit to what Ops Compass does, and just at a very high level, we're a awesome SaaS application that helps customers with cloud operations management, security, compliance, things like that. My role at Ops Compass is I'm the employee number one and founder, and we're up to 60 or 70 people now, which is fun. And my role now is that I really work through like our product strategy, where we're going with the product, but also kind of clarifying what is our opinion, what do we think, what do we think about cloud security, what do we think about the role of configurations and things like that. So it's quite a bit of fun in terms of what I get to work on a day-to-day basis. It's a nice variety of stuff. I get to talk to folks like you, so it's pretty cool. My background is I'm a career entrepreneur, so I've never really actually done anything other than work for companies that I've started, which is I now this dates me a little bit, but I did work at Blockbuster Video in like 2001. So when I was like a high school kid, so that was I always joke that was my last real job. But I got into this space through a company that I co-founded with a buddy of mine in college, where we hosted websites that were built on a content management system called .NET Nuke, which was you could run it on the .NET stack. So think about early 2000s. Every company in the world was starting to build websites, and they were each department and business unit was trying to build sites. Like the Web 2.0 boom was like a really big deal. And we were college guys that knew a lot about .NET Nuke, and .NET Nuke didn't even have a website. It was in the ASP.NET forums. They were hosted in the ASP.NET forums. And anyway, we started a hosting business, and it really blew up. And a lot of it was because of the timing with the Web 2.0 kind of explosion. But, like all these companies were trying to figure out a way to get a corporate, like a website up for like a project without having to use SharePoint. And so like our list of customers, even early on, was really impressive. And most of it was just because .NET Nuke is something open source you could run on like IaaS and SQL Server. It just like caught on. So that was kind of my first like entree. Like I had tried to start a bunch of things in college. I was pretty entrepreneurial, just doing all sorts of stuff. I bought a bunch of real estate during the real estate boom when they would loan money to kids, basically. But this really took off, and we had a good run, and we became a top 5 global ASP.NET hosting provider. And along the way, I met a lot of investors and people that I'd come to work with. And the founder of the data center company that we worked with, and we had infrastructure around the world. He ended up being a good mentor for me, and he's now he's our CEO and my partner here at Ops Compass, Manny Cavedo. So we go back a ways. Like when I exited, we've done a couple other projects together, and we've done some investing together and things like that. So I kind of got sucked back in. A lot of my contemporaries in the hosting industry stuck around a really long time trying to figure out how to like provide hosting services on VMs in the cloud and do a lot of these things. And they didn't really embrace kind of the paradigm shift that was coming. And for me, I was like all about it all from the start. I'm like, I want to build software. We don't need a hosting, a NOC and a SOC and all this stuff. Like we're going to build software to solve these kind of same classes of problems we solve through our hosting and managed services.
Mm-hmm. All right. I mean, the way you describe the hosting, it reminds me,
maybe 10 years back when I was working in a partner, we used to take the cages in the telco operators, right? Their data centers and manage services. And I used to, stands in the data centers, freezing cold and all that. So that's, and now after 10 years, now it's cloud, right? So it's just the same.
I haven't been in a data center in years, and data centers used to be such a big part of my life. And I mean, I haven't even thought about one, you're right. The being, freezing in a data center, racking servers used to be a major part of my life.
Right. I was in 2000, maybe 8, 9, when we were, we were having maybe we were managed services provider as a partner when I was working with a partner company. So we used to go to customer and ask them, okay, we'll take your whole footprint, Microsoft Exchange, application, and everything, and put it in the data center. We took a hosting space in telco operators data centers, and then we just put it and then managed it. That's the whole I was doing it. All right, good. So now, the one point I catch up from your whole introduction that you never worked as an employee. So that was you started all the businesses, companies working from your college. So that's unique to me, frankly. I'm a working guy who works in some different companies. So that keep inspiring you, the first experience when you started as after college, whatever the graduation, or why it keep leading you that yes, this is the right way to do it, or you should go to join a college, some company.
It was I wish I could say that it was like this real deliberate thing that I thought deeply about. Both my parents are doctors. My sister's a doctor. Like my grandpa's a doctor. So it was always just implied that I would, go to college and I would probably go on to some graduate education. And as I mentioned earlier, I just started doing like pretty much any idea I had, I kind of pursued in one way or another. And when we kind of got traction with the hosting company and things started really rolling, like I ended up dropping out of school, mostly just like it was a utilitarian decision. I didn't have time. We had like 12 employees. Like I felt pretty good that, the future was bright and that, I'll figure out what I'm going to do with college or whatever at some other point, and that was really early on. And that was just kind of how like my career really kicked off. And, building a large hosting provider from a technical perspective, like to do that. You're really like from networking to security, hardware, you're making hardware purchasing decisions. Like, that's a lot of how I was thinking about Ops Compass. Is the MVP of Ops Compass really came from kind of a thought experiment I had is, well, what if we took our old hosting business? Okay. What if we took the hosting business like at its peak? But all of a sudden, just in one day, we had to meet all of the same obligations we made to customers, but we had to move them to the cloud.
All right.
So what types of stuff would I need to do? Like what kind of tools would I need and things like that? So that I'm really thankful because that first company was really kind of like my education. I knew a lot about tech. Like I met my partner in a Cisco thing where they had kids who knew a lot about computers. They indoctrinated them into Cisco and got them like CCNAs like in high school.
Right.
So, I knew some stuff, but nothing like having to go from 0 to thousands of customers and, hundreds and hundreds of servers and making it all work. So that really, that was an education in and of itself for me. And like, I think it was really valuable.
Okay. And now if it comes to Ops Compass, what are the core services? It comes from idea from hosting company, but what are the core services, what you focus right now?
Well, at a high level, what we like to say is that we help customers with cloud operations management. So what that means is Ops Compass is going to provide a rich inventory of all your resources. It's agentless, and we're going to discover resources as they're being created, modified, et cetera. We do deep analysis and detection of drift and all those sorts of things on those environments as well. So then from there, we're able to give customers kind of visibility into what's happening, which then gives you kind of a feedback loop into maybe CI/CD pipelines or other patterns and practices, help with compliance audits, all sorts of things of that nature. So as you can imagine, coming from a hosting background,
All right.
the critical things for me were always like, how do we know what IPs we have out there? And,
All right.
that surface, that attack, like the way you think about an attack surface, I guess, from a hosting provider's perspective is much different than in an enterprise IT world, because there is no kind of monolithic perimeter that everything's in this big trust zone. You've got all these customers that have public facing stuff, and you need to figure out a way to make it secure.
All right. Now, if I relate with the vendors or the cloud providers, I mean Oracle, AWS, Google, so Azure, so how you fit into that space? I mean, they must be having their own tools. So how you play into customers' place? That yes, I mean, is it something focusing on multi-cloud, or is it something what space you're filling from a customer point of view?
Sure. So from a customer point of view, we're primarily filling the space of what sort of posture management tools are they using? Dealing with the configurations. So you have cloud security posture management, for instance, that's an exploding category, because it basically means the secure configurations that you're using across your whole environment. I gotta pop up here on my screen. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
So where was I at again? I'm sorry. I literally just had Windows, of course, pop up with the full screen and say, "What time? Pick a time to restart."
That's okay. We were talking about, I mean, with the cloud vendors when they have
Yeah. So a couple of things with that. So what we find customers want, and I think you find validated through like the different analysts, is that customers are really looking to use native tools where they can in the clouds. And that's just a fact. The line is blurry between what is a distinct native tool and what is just a configuration of a feature on a type of cloud resource. But customers also want to be able to use more focused tools in certain areas, because these hyperscale cloud providers, you can't possibly build the tools that are going to satisfy the use cases, particularly across enterprises where there's kind of a lot more messiness. So where Ops Compass shines is obviously in the multi-cloud scenario. That's a big deal. We can save people a lot of time by being able to centralize across multiple clouds, kind of the inventory and discovery and drift detection and reporting and all those sorts of things. But the other thing is kind of, I mentioned kind of complementing them. We're using those APIs and a lot of the robust features that are built into the cloud already. So when somebody's using Ops Compass, they're also leveraging many of these things their cloud's building, and we're helping them use the information in more useful ways. These clouds, if you think about it, the user interface, like the portal,
right.
It's a lowest common denominator thing that they're trying to just meet the demands of like millions of customers. Right. But the richness of these services really lies in the APIs. And so by using Ops Compass, you're able to leverage those APIs more easily without having to integrate it all yourself. But then we also do some other things beyond where the clouds are going in terms of correlating different types of information, building actually deeper definitions of resources than you can get usually with a CLI command that says, "Hey, show me this user." So it's one of those things where like maybe our biggest competitor might be the cloud providers and their native tools, but it's also, we work in concert with them. So all of our customers are using kind of both. So I think a lot of what dictates that is kind of the scale. When a customer gets big enough, they just need to have some focused tools. And when you're still small, the native tools like in totality work for you.
All right. And then you mentioned another one point, which I picked up, that you don't need to install any agent, or it's just on APIs. So how you interact with the different cloud providers? I mean, if I'm a customer, do I need to put some agent on my compute or my storage or how you will interact to my cloud tenancy or my cloud account?
It's pretty slick and it's secure. And what I like about it, because I end up having to deal a lot with like companies' vendor compliance officers, is it's an identity that has permissions to read access to APIs, but that identity lives in the customer security context. So, in Azure, for instance, it's going to be essentially what we would call like a service principal that has certain permissions to APIs. And that's what we use in AWS. It's like an assumed role. So from a customer integration perspective, it's not only like quick. You could do it in a couple minutes, but you're kind of in control. If you want to just completely disconnect, you have control of that service identity. So it's nice that way.
Okay. And so now from a customer's point of view, why this posture management is important for them now? I mean, is it something with the security, with the cyber attacks, or the way their internal users are working, and why it started coming from maybe a couple of years back? So why this is now more critical compared to earlier they were working with on-premise or even with the hosting providers?
I think that now it's the reason why now you hear about it. And I think before we actually cared a lot about posture management. Like now it's a word that we people make fun of because it's an odd word to use in tech. But I remember talking about security posture 15 years ago.
All right.
But I just think it was out of the spot. If you were like a data center person or in security, you maybe thought about it a little bit. But what the shared responsibility model of the clouds has meant is that, when you're plugging into a cloud, you're using software. And the shared responsibility model means that you have this whole set of configs, your whole platform, essentially, you're responsible for those. The cloud provider has their infrastructure platform and they're part of that. So now these configurations become sort of paramount. Add to that DevOps, faster deployments. Companies now, it's 2021. The cloud's been around now for quite a while. There's just larger cloud estates. And you're starting to feel the pressure points of the insufficient skills on internal teams, the low vendor compatibility of tools that were kind of legacy that you've been making work in the cloud, but it's not a long-term sort of issue, and just general kind of lack of visibility into, what's going on. So I think that's been a kind of a confluence of things that have contributed to something that sounds as esoteric as cloud security posture management being at the top of many people's minds today.
Right. Okay. So let's ask non-tech questions to just,
awesome.
So then we'll come back to the we got the basics
cool.
set so now right now. So while working, as an entrepreneur, so what is the biggest mistake you made? Which you think that was, we should have changed it, or I should have done something else?
From a technical perspective,
or
just
technical, or a business point of view, or anything.
I actually think that I wish there's times, especially early on, when you're young and you get into this,
right?
People talk about imposter syndrome. But, and I was the type of guy, that's how I got into this. I was the type of kid who I felt like I belonged in every room. Like I was almost blind to how ridiculous it was, having me like put on like a suit and try and go do some of these things. But at the same time, I actually look back and I kind of wish I was more aggressive about certain things. And I was like so aggressive about some things, but like I didn't realize, when you're young, you don't realize when you've got some momentum and something's really going, now I look back, I'm like, shoot, I could have made that thing 10 times what it was if I had been a little bit more aggressive. But when you're young, you're kind of happy to be there a little bit. And you just sort of feel like, well, holy cow, I don't want to disrupt the boat. But at almost every turn, I would say that if I could do anything over, I would have been a little bit more aggressive.
All right. Any
Did you expect that? Did you expect that to be?
No, I didn't expect, frankly. I thought.
Well, yeah, I think back at these things and it's like, man, we should have raised a ton of money for that.
Yeah. Or maybe something I was thinking to start something else, and that, but that was my plan.
I've got some dumb kind of technical ones. Like I ran a really, really flat network one time and it was easy to support and awesome until it wasn't. And we had some security issues. I've got those, but like the main one to me is always like, yeah, when something's working, like it's hard to make stuff work. So like triple down on it. Like that's where the VCs kind of, at least at a high level, theoretically get it right. Like it's rare to have something really start to work. So like go run.
All right. Any book which play a role in your life, inspires you, or any suggestion? I should read it. Or are you not a book lover guy?
I'm a huge reader, but to be honest with you, I don't read a lot of books about business, or I read
Tech
pretty
book or
widely,
anything.
but about lots of
Okay.
like Scott Aronson's got an awesome quantum computing book that I think is
Okay.
like Scott Aronson is excellent. A book that really got me into like deep reading and reading heavily. It was funny. I was doing everything when I was in college, but going to class. I was reading lots of books and I was starting companies, but I wasn't going to class. But Jared Diamond's Gun, Germs, and Steel, I always thought was just such an excellent book. I'm a big fan of like I'm a big kind of dork of like Russian history, and I read a lot of Russian novels. So
Okay. All right.
yeah, that's kind of masochistic in many ways. Like, but I like to read. You know, I like to read books where there's something that I can really glean from it. I used to
All
only
right.
read nonfiction when I was younger.
Mhm.
And as I got older, I started to realize how much of learning I was missing by limiting myself only to nonfiction books. And I was actually reading about the French Revolution. And so many books had referenced the Tale of Two Cities that I went back and I read. I think I remember reading it in high school. And I've read all of like Dickens' work, but like I just realized that there's something that comes from reading, especially like literature that I've really enjoyed. So I usually pop, two or three kind of books like that a year, but I found that it's pretty edifying.
All right. Now, most of our audiences are working in different companies where in a tech background or a business background. And the way cloud is coming, every organization is going for different cloud providers, migrating or lifting and shifting their workloads and all that. So what are the, some key elements or best practices from a security or a generally they should keep in mind as you're being in this industry and being a CTO for one organization. So if there is a one customer and he's CTO or that company's some IT manager or a other system administrator, he should keep some fundamentals, a framework or something in mind. What do you think? If you can share some that, I think learning that would really help.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is upfront when you think that you should be thinking about all these like really technical details about your cloud implementation, like really think about governance and organization. Right. The major cloud providers, the hyperscalers, have just like copious documentation around how to split out workloads, basically how to like govern and manage these environments. And it's not like the data center where you could sort of build your own Franken infrastructure that you can be really smart and, build things maybe a slightly different way. In the cloud, there's definite best practices for most scenarios, not all, but very definite best practices. So I encourage, like, when you're starting out, think about how does the cloud provider recommend you scope things? Do you put an app on an individual cloud account, or do you put multiple ones in there? How do they recommend you use tagging? There's other best practices beyond just what the cloud providers say. There's like the CIS benchmarks for GCP, Azure, AWS, et cetera. And like those are really useful because they're prescriptive. It's not like, it doesn't just say, hey, you need to do a good job with access control. It will say, here's how to configure your users. So that's what I would say, because everybody's very excited to turn it to solve the best sort of technical problem. And it's kind of like what like our wives tell us, like, slow down, read the instructions. How about you read the instructions before you try and put together the bike? People don't do that. They don't think it occurs to them how important it is to like read how the cloud providers recommend you govern, manage, secure these things, because they're mostly right.
Okay. All right. And how Ops Compass can help them? I mean, if they are embarking on a journey where they have 3 cloud providers, they have bit and pieces using from 3 different cloud providers. Now they do following up their own set of tools, native tools which are available. So how you can assist them? I mean, as your product on which area that can assist them, if you can put some light to that.
Yeah. Well, what people will find is, particularly once lit up more than one cloud is now you have to monitor 3 different control planes, and you have all these different services and a whole different sets of APIs. Like almost none of your work transfers over from one cloud to another. So right out the gate, being able to have kind of near real time inventory, and that's a huge deal for customers, who have multi-cloud scenarios. But the other thing that I would say is, as customers grow, it's not just kind of surface area of the cloud. The ways that they interact with the cloud changes. So a customer that has a lot of cloud will be kind of more DevOps mature. So when you think about, if you as an organization believe it's a good thing for you to know and understand your current cloud state,
right.
And most people would say, yeah, of course we do. Well, as you become more DevOps mature now, unless you've accounted for it, a lot of the knowledge about your cloud state is now living in like Terraform state files on a bunch of build servers all over the place, right?
All over the places.
Yeah. So it's like you should be using infrastructure as code. That's part of the journey. It helps you with overall, it's a net absolute plus, but it also kind of leads people down the road of thinking that, so this state file or whatever was committed, what's in GitHub is what's actually out in my cloud. And it's hard to have that be the case. Sure. So what Ops Compass does is it's an easy way for you to plug in and sort of go on that journey. And as you're adding clouds, as you're getting more kind of complex with how your deployments are happening, you still have that kind of visibility and assurance. Like you definitely know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. That's and that's what you refer to Terraform and all that one, and it just goes here and there. I mean, we want to use the infrastructure as a code, but it's still a lot of places, and then it varies from cloud vendor to vendor, and then the way you want to write there, you want to access their APIs, and then it comes back to your inventory. That if you have hundreds of machines, databases, or the compute instances, that's hell of work to manage through. All right, so we covered, that's a good one. I think an interesting conversation. So we covered the personal level, how you start the business. Now, if a college graduate wanted to start, he's a college graduate, and he wanted to start a business, or he wanted to start some startup nowadays. Very. So the way media started exploiting what started happening, a lot of college graduates are even in the mid 30s or 40s leaving the jobs, and then they want to start their own business. And then we are also reading some statistics on that most of startups are not successful, right? So there is a lot of researchers are doing work that although people wanted to move and they wanted to cut their day-to-day job and they wanted to start. So what are some of the learnings or some of the key points? As per your experience, someone, if he wants to start his own business in a tech or a non-tech, generally he should keep in mind. What do you think?
I think that people should be really aware of some of the local resources that they have. Part of the reason you mentioned kind of the growing mind share of kind of startups and the startup scene,
correct.
If you will. And like that's seeped into a lot of like state government economic development funding and things like that. So there's lots of opportunities for at the seed level to get non-dilutive capital from government and other sorts of sources. Right. So I would definitely use that. And I think that sometimes people are afraid of that. Sometimes it's paperwork, and shouldn't say nobody. Very few people who are entrepreneurs like doing a lot of paperwork. So
right.
True. So I would leverage that. I would also the other thing that I've noticed is, you hear the statistics about the success rate of a startup, and all they're doing is taking just all the startups that ever started and then all the ones that like end up. And that's not a bad way to measure it, but like if you could actually dig down a little bit more granular, if you took say, well, what percentage of people fail that get to this step in the process? That number goes from being like this, you have as good of a chance of playing in Major League Baseball, all the way down to like really manageable stuff like So if you say, well, how many people fail after they got a product to market? Like they actually had a product and they got like even had 3 users. That number is like way lower and much less daunting. So my other tip would be just to move forward, like try and move forward and do things and accomplish things, because every day you're accomplishing something, that sort of percentage of like failure goes down and down and down, because other people are checking out, saying, hey, this isn't for me, or I don't have the wherewithal to do this, or the capital, or whatever. So it's in some ways it's a survival game, even though I do think more people should be willing to fail.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the fantastic, if you ask me, and I agree with you that even if you're doing it, so you're learning the journey which you're doing it, and 1 year, 2 years, it's a product launch, preparation, even this paperwork and all that. That's also a one way of learning, right? Even the failure gives you the the learning which you get along the way. So I really, I like that even you leave that part of paperwork. I mean the ratio of people who actually launch, and then what is the success rate? That's a very good the way you describe it. All right.
I started thinking about I have a cousin who produces like award shows, like the MTV Movie Awards and that sort of thing. And I remember I was at like some sort of family gathering, and somebody said, what are the odds that this girl from Kansas could be a producer on one of these? And it's like I was thinking about it because I'm a dork like that. And it's like, well, the odds, at the very start are pretty low. But once you get to the point where she moved out to LA and like you start taking these real steps to pursue, it's like, I bet you the odds actually get like pretty good, even like once you get to certain points, like you've moved out to LA and you have like an initial position in one of like the studios. You're like getting people's coffee, but you're there. It's like, it's not a lock, but like all of a sudden it's not that provocative to say, well, what are the odds? It's like, no, you're kind of on the track. And I don't think people fully appreciate that.
Right. All right. I think we had a wonderful, till now, very good discussion. So thank you so much. I'm just near to the conclusion. So I will ask one maybe last question. So what are some bad recommendations or suggestions you get all the way as in being, or you're running your own business? So what are some recommendation we should ignore it? You don't listen that one.
Oh man, I should be able to think of a bunch of those, but I'm going blank. Let me think for just a second. Because yeah, you're right. You get probably more bad advice than you get good advice from. My dad wouldn't like hearing this, but I've given him crap about it before. But I've got Crohn's disease, which is neither here nor there. But I remember when I was young in college, he was saying, you got to be a teacher so then you can have good insurance. And it won't, it's not as stressful, and you won't, your Crohn's won't act up, and you'll have good insurance. And that didn't really resonate with me, especially as a youngster, like the good insurance. It's like, I don't even care about insurance. But that was kind of anti-advice.
Right.
There's some things like I kind of like I'm tempted to say something about advice about raising either too much money or too little, but I found over time there's just reasons sometimes to not raise as much money, and there's other times that you should try and just totally go for as much as you can possibly get. So I don't know if any of those would be just on the face bad advice. That's part of the reason why I don't read advice books and business books and stuff.
That's a good one.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's read something where you can really learn something about the world and about how people work and stuff like that. Because the problem with those books is there's just so much situational bias and survivorship bias and all these other things that like, it's nice to read a story about somebody, but it's like you're bending over backwards thinking about how these things apply to your life. There's all sorts of circumstances that they don't bring up in the book because it doesn't fit in with the narrative. So you kind of just need to take so many of those. So I prefer to just read books where I like learn really interesting things.
Sure. Thank you so much, John, for joining this
session. Thank you.
With us. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it was very, I think I loved it. The way we discussed the different, points, personally, startups, as a founder or a CTO, and then some of the areas where the business-wise, tech, especially the clouds, different providers, how the security is impacting nowadays. And that definitely will help our lot of audiences that's are going to be more focusing on nowadays. Either they are system administrator or IT manager or the business heads or the CIOs. Really appreciate. If you want to leave some last, comments for the anything which you think that we for business guys or IT guys should keep in mind from a security point of view or anything from a cloud, just last concluding remarks.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed doing this. This is fun. My advice to everybody all the time is like, go learn stuff, go do interesting things, go read actually cool books. Don't go searching for like direct life advice. I like that you forced me to bring that up. I like that. Also, you can go to opscompass.com and you can get a free version of Ops Compass, which is cool. So you get all the inventory, discovery, multiple clouds, all that stuff. You could have tens of thousands of resources. It's totally free in perpetuity. But your first 14 days of it, you get the full product. So right. For me, I always like to get really good feedback. People can reach out to me directly. Right. I don't know if you have show notes or whatever, but I'd love to get just direct feedback from anybody. And I'm always interested in chatting with folks and
I will add it in the show notes. Yes, I will do that one. All the information and everything on the show notes. Sure. And then
awesome.
Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Talking to you.
Thanks for listening to the OTech Talks podcast and be part of Tech Talks at otechtalks.tv. It's a turf to share ideas, insights, and innovations.